Welcome again to Flame of Truth. I'm Pastor Dan Smith. I'm the senior pastor at the La Sierra University Church out in Riverside, California. Going to start a new series this week dealing with the story of the King David. Mentioned over 700 times in the Bible, just a giant. So let's talk about off with their heads, the story of David and Goliath. Anyway, just to get started, I don't know what kind of giants you have in your life. I clipped a story out from somewhere years ago about a man who bought a house, and somehow there were rattlesnakes just hidden in the basement and in the walls. One by one, he got people to come and kill all these rattlesnakes, and there was one left. They just could not seem to track down this rattle. Well, how do you live in a house when you know there's a rattlesnake? So he got a friend, and they got one of these, all the lights you use in a garage or working on your car, and then with a long extension cord, and so they crawled in with this light, holding the light out in front of them where they thought the snake was in this little crawl space. So they got in there, it's dark, and they're crawling towards it, his friend's behind him. They can tell the rattle is right there, they're about to kill this rattlesnake, when his friend pulls that cord out of the socket, and all the light goes out, and here they are in the darkness with a rattlesnake right in front of them, and you can't see a thing. You can imagine the excitement. It's a giant. What kind of giants in your life? I can remember years ago as a young youth pastor, some of the fathers of my youth took me with their kids up to way up in Bow Run National Lake up in British Columbia in Canada. And we had to, portage canoes, and we would carry the canoe over a mountain and then paddle an hour maybe across the lake and then take the canoe. We had to carry the canoe over the mountain and then hike back over and then climb with our pack. And it was pouring down rain and slipping and sliding, and you're carrying this canoe over your head and banging into trees. And then we got down there and we had 2 mountains behind me, 70 miles of canoeing to go in the rain. I was feeling sick, had a fever over 100. This is a giant. Difficult. What are you going to do, giant like that? Some of you will know this story, when I was a young pastor, came home one day and my house was half empty. My ex-wife had taken all the furniture out of the house. A few months later, I was standing there at the door when the sheriff walked up and handed me a divorce decree. Going to be single now for a few years. It's a giant. A while ago, I went to a Toyota dealership. For the first time in my life, they talked me into a lease. It was going to be cheaper, so I signed a lease. And he wrote a sheet of paper and told me if I would come back in 2 years, pay the lease payments, I could convert it to a purchase and it would be this much, and it was a good deal. Okay, fine. So I paid my payments faithfully. 2 years later, I called up to find out what my payoff would be. I was going to come down and pay it. It was $5,400 more than what he had told me. It was a giant. How do you take on the whole Toyota dealership when there's a giant? Well, we're studying the story of David facing giant. David himself was a giant. And David is very real. We call this series Earthy Spirituality. It's real. David is real. He lives real problems. He gets mad. He has trouble with his children. He doesn't always do what God wants him to do. Commits murder, commits adultery. And yet David is a man after God's own heart. He builds a temple, or works to get a temple built with his son in the glory and honor God. He dances with all his might before the ark. He repents. He loves God. He writes psalms. He's a man after God's own heart. So let's study David a little bit. You know the story. Saul is king. God had chosen Saul to be the king, but Saul began to compromise, begins to disobey God. Finally, God tells Saul to destroy all the Amalekites. Don't leave a single being alive. Women, children, animals, all gone. But Saul keeps the king alive and some of the animals. Samuel comes and says, "What is this I hear?" And Saul says, "Well, I thought I should have these to sacrifice, to honor God." And God says, better to obey God than to sacrifice. And he tells Saul that God has rejected him as king, and that God is going to find someone else who will be a man after his own heart, who will do whatever I tell him to do. So that's the story of who David is. God tells Samuel to go to Bethlehem and goes to Jesse's house to anoint a new king. Has the horn of oil, going to choose a king today. Here comes the brothers. all of Jesse's sons. Oh, sure, this is the one. Not him, not him, not him. After all these sons are gone, he said, do you have any more? This isn't the one. Finally, David comes. One more, a shepherd boy out in the fields. And God whispers to Samuel, this is the one, a man after his own heart. God looks on the heart, not on the outward appearance. And so it says that Samuel anointed him with oil. God told Samuel, rise and anoint him. He is the one. And it says, from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. Saul had been rejecting the Holy Spirit. Now David is filled with the Holy Spirit. We have this transition from one king to the next. And now we come to 1 Samuel chapter 17, the great famous children's story. Everybody knows the story, Goliath. We have the two armies on two sides of the valley. Here's Goliath and all of his army, the Philistines, and all of the Israelites in the trenches. For 40 days, they've been in this stalemate. And Goliath coming out as the king. He is huge, maybe 10 feet tall, wearing 200 pounds of armor, carrying a spear 25 pounds. And he just cries out to all of Israel and defies Israel and God's army. And he says in 1 Samuel verse 8, choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. Then the Philistines said, this day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Saul's a giant too. He's taller than all the others, but he himself is scared compared to this giant from the other side. Jesse sends David down to check on his brothers. David finally finds where the battle is, and he comes along and hears Goliath shouting out this warning. And David just cannot stand it. He hears soldiers talking about what Saul will do if somebody will stand up and fight against this man. Maybe even give him money and give his own daughter. And so David says in verse 26, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And then Eliab, David's older brother, gets mad. What are you doing here? You just want to come and observe the battle? Why are you trying? What is the point of you being here? It's always the way it is. These people have been cowering in the trenches for 40 days, being beaten down, humiliated, chastised, made fun of. Now they feel beaten down. And so you take it out upon someone who's even smaller than you. Every time when people are criticizing, you have to understand why they're criticizing, because they have some deficit. They have been beaten down somewhere else in their lives. In order for them to feel taller, in order for them to feel bigger and be giants, they have to find someone else who is smaller than them, make them feel small so they can feel like a giant. It's always what happens. Hard to deal with criticism. David's ready to do something that no one else is willing to do, willing to go and fight this giant and do something great for God. And you get criticized for it. It's always the way it happens. Cheap shots. But David doesn't give in to his brother, doesn't fight his brother. It's usually what we do. We fight the one criticizing. Don't fight that one. Not going to let unfair criticism have that much power in his life. Don't give it that much power. Refuses to give him that much kind of control over how you feel. And David says, I'm going to get on with my mission. I'm not going to be deterred from the mission that you have given to me to do, God. And he says, I will go and I will fight this man. I'm not going to be sidetracked. And so we have to be careful. It's not God's mission to fight among ourselves, to fight among the church, fight among people criticizing. We have a mission to give to the world. We cannot be sidetracked by the people who aren't doing anything, who are criticizing. I heard a preacher's meeting and someone was criticizing Bill Hybels, Willow Creek, huge, wonderful, powerful church. And I heard Rick Warren says, Bill Hybels has more seekers in his bathrooms than you have in your whole church. It's the people who aren't doing anything, who are the quick to criticize someone who is doing something great for God. And then it says you have to decide if the criticism is true. If it's untrue, just forget it. If it is true, fix it and move on, but don't be sidetracked. And then David says to Saul, 1 Samuel 17, verse 32, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Here's heart again. Don't let someone lose heart. David's a man after God's own heart. Saul lost his heart. They lost their heart. But David said, let no one lose heart over this one. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul says, you're not able to go out. You're only a boy. You can't fight a giant like this. And David tells them about killing the lion and the bear. Why is this story important about the lions and the bears? Some people think you can wait. Wait until you have a giant. You don't want to deal with lions and bears, these small little things. I'm going to wait until there's a giant for me to kill. No, it is in killing the lions and the bears that you gain the experience and the confidence and the faith to be able to deal with the Goliaths when they come. The reason so many people cannot fight the Goliaths is because they refuse to fight the lions and the bears along the way. And so it matters, these little small battles that we fight, the small giants, the small Goliaths, the small lions and bears. You have to find those. Don't run when those come. David's out there in the fields, and he deals with the lion and he deals with the bear with a slingshot. And he gets confident so that when the Goliath comes, he's ready for it. It's a great lesson. And he knew that if God could deliver him from the lion and the bear, he could deliver him from the Philistine. 1 Samuel 17, verse 37. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. So if he can give me from the hand of the bear, from the hand of the lion, he can deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. Learn to face the lions and bears so you'll be ready when the Goliaths and the giants come. If God did it before, then he'll do it again for you. So when you have a tough project facing you, when you have difficult people to work with, when there's a financial challenge, I have mission projects all over the world or in my church, pastor a big church, constant financial challenges. Don't be afraid. Don't run from the small ones. It is in fighting the little ones and you seeing God come through that it gives you confidence to deal with the big ones. I could tell you many stories about that. Don't run from the lions and the bears. If you run from the lions and the bears, you'll run from the giants when they come. What about this armor? Saul wants him to go out in his armor. Here, wear this. David puts it on. But David cannot walk around in this armor. He says, verse 39, I cannot go in these because I am not used to them. So he takes them off. One of the great lessons been hard for me to learn is to march and fight in your own armor. And as a young preacher, I would listen to tapes from my Uncle Maury Vindon. Someone gave me a whole bag yesterday. And you listen to a tape, I should preach like that. Or you listen to Dwight Nelson or Chuck Swindoll or some other person. And we have all these voices in our head. I should be like that. I wish I could be like that. And we begin to norm our lives by other people. But the message is to fight in your own armor. God made you to be a particular person, to fight your way and to fight your giants and your Goliaths that come along the way. And you have to do it in your own way. Andrew Gaudet said, what another would have done as well as you, do not do it. What another would have said as well as you, do not say it. Written as well, do not write it. Be faithful to that which exists nowhere but in yourself, and thus make yourself indispensable. Someone else said, the greatest gift you can give to the world is to be yourself, to be what God made you to be. And I slowly have tried to learn that, to be comfortable in your own skin. I grew up in Thailand, went to high school in Singapore. Far Eastern Academy is closed now. Back then, 40 years ago, we would be pressured to wear little narrow black ties, white shirts, short sleeve, tight black pants, stopped at the top of your socks, white socks, black shoes. If you deviated from this uniform, you would be laughed off the school bus. Pressure to conform. And I came back from overseas, we began to wear colored shirts and flowered ties. We would conform to that. Not easy to resist the pressure and become someone who lives in his own armor and comfortable within their own skin. But that's the greatest gift. Romans 12, verse 2, don't let the world squeeze you into its mold, from the J.B. Phillips Bible. Then it says that David knelt down and got 5 stones. It's a good lesson. When you're facing a giant, first you better kneel down. And then it says in 1 Samuel 17, verse 41, we have this passage. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome. And he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And David comes back in verse 45. David said to the Philistine, You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. What a great testimony. And then he says in verse 46, today, this day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there was a God in Israel. You can see the parallel to this in Revelation 19, Revelation 20 to see the great final feast. We have the feast in heaven, there's a feast on earth, and the birds of the air will feast on the carcasses at the end of the world. Well, now we come to some other lessons we need to learn from this passage. Here's the heart of the story. David said to the Philistines, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin. Whatever is going on in your life, whatever giants or Goliaths you have, all you can see is their swords and their spears and their javelins. That's what you can see. It is what is visible to you. And message of the story, these are nothing compared with God. So the problem is we can't see God. God is invisible. What we can see are the swords and the spears and the javelins. And the great challenge is how to somehow not be so terrified of the javelins and swords and spears when we have God and understand that they are nothing in the face of God. But that's what we see. What do you see as you live in the real world? Do you see the giants? Do you see the swords and the spears and the javelins? David's not blind. He sees that. He says, I can see them coming. But he sees something much bigger and much more real to him, which we cannot see. David lives in the real world. He is not naive. He is not blind. He sees what the challenges are, sees how big the giant is. He sees the armor. He sees what he has to face. But he sees the whole bigger unseen world, that God, who is a much greater giant than the giant that is in front of him. The God who can overwhelm all the swords and spears and javelins of our world today. That's what faith is, the imagination to see another world that is bigger and more powerful than the visible world that we see. We see the walls of Jericho. God sees the wall. Faith sees walls that will come tumbling down. We see the Red Sea. Only the people of faith like Moses can see the waters opening up. How to learn to be people of faith, to have imagination, to see another real world that is more powerful than the swords and spears and javelins that we see in our world. Then verse 46 again, this day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. You understand what lights up the soul of David, because he says, when I get this done, the world is going to know that there is a God in Israel. What burns within David? Number one is he hates it that God's name is being desecrated. God's army, God's great controversy is being challenged and being defied. And he will not allow the army of the living God to be desecrated and defied and dishonored in this way. And he says, I will not stand it. He can't stand it to hear someone defy God, take God's name in vain. Are you have that in your soul? How do you feel when you hear God's name or to hear God dishonored in any way? Does it burn within your soul? David can't stand it. He says, I will not let this go by. But then the other passion in David is to say, I'm going to do something here so that people will know there is a God in Israel. He is not gone. He is not dead. He is not silent. There is a God in Israel. And then it says in verse 47, all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, but the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. You can't trust in anything human. You can't trust in your job, in your family, in your money, in your knowledge, in your things, in your life insurance, or anything else that you have. It'll be nothing human what you can see. His battle is the Lord's. We trust in God, and God will deliver you all into our hands. That's what David had learned. And now we learn the next point. David doesn't just pray. Too many people say, I'll just pray about it. Just pray about it. There's a time to pray, yes. But now more than just praying, we go down to the creek and we get the stones and we run and we face the giant. We do something. We will not just cower in our little trench. They had all been praying. All of the soldiers of Israel had been praying for someone to come, hiding there in the trenches. It's not enough to pray. We have to pray, and then we have to get out of the trench. Get out of being intimidated and go out and face the giant. Kneel down, yes, kneel down, get our stones. Go out and face the giant and say, I will not let you defy the living God. I will do something about this. And then you throw and you aim and you trust God to aim that rock at exactly the right place it needs to go. Only God can aim the rock. But we have to go pick up the rocks. We have to put the rock in the sling and we have to throw it. You have to combine prayer with doing what God whispers in you to do. Get up and move. And it is always the challenge then, while you're throwing a rock and while you're doing something, to still remember the battle is the Lord's. So there's this incredible battle between what God will do and I will do. We will march around the walls. God makes the walls come tumbling down. Moses puts the rod out. God opens up the Red Sea. It's always God's miracle, but we always want us to do something. Pick up a rock and throw it. God will aim it. Then we come down to the message. Whatever Goliath is in your life, whatever you're facing, God is more than up to it. God has more power than all the Goliaths that might be in your life. I don't know what you're facing today. I know the Goliaths that I face, finances in the church, being criticized, family challenges, raising your kids, going through a marriage challenge, job pressure, whatever it is. Whatever giant and Goliath is in front of you, whatever sword, spear, and javelin is in front of you, God is more powerful than that. And God has the answer if you will just do something. You cannot let Goliath stand in the way. Get out of the trench. Get out of being intimidated. Get out of the hole you've been in and say, I'm not going to let this giant put me down anymore. I'm going to get out and I will face it. Kneel down and get a rock and let it fly and trust God to begin to kill off the Goliaths in your life. Just to finish the story about the Toyota car, I went down to that huge Toyota dealership, asked the boys to go with me so I wouldn't do anything wrong, little boys at that time. I went into that sales manager and I showed him the sheet of paper. Here's what the price the salesman told me. He signed it. And I said, I can't pay this extra $5,000. I need you to do what the right thing is. You told me what it would be. They went a couple hours later, they came back and they said, with $5,000, make it right. Thank you very much. God slayed a dragon. It won't happen the same way every time. God has power. He who is within you is greater than he who is in the world. 1 John 4, verse 4. Well, we need to go on with this quickly, off with our heads. David reached down and he cut off the head of Goliath. It's a huge chapter. 2 chapters before, God fires Saul from being king because Saul refused to get rid of everything. He kept back the king and some of the animals. God says, get rid of everything. And too many people are not willing to clear it all off. And they get rid of some sin, but they keep a little sin. They keep a few little things there. And says, no, I can't get rid of everything. And God says, cut off the head. Don't give this Goliath a chance to come back. Be done with it. God wants closure. Don't give anything in your life a chance to come back and shout and defy the armies of the living God anymore. Say, I want closure. I will cut off the head. If you don't kill sin, sin will kill you. Find a way to get it on. You can't let it hang around. You will never be free. You'll always be cowering in the trenches, waiting, letting another giant come and put you down. No, get rid of the giant and cut off its head. Be done with it once and for all. Don't let sin dabble around in your lives. There were 2 deer hunters who had killed a deer, were dragging it back to their truck. The antlers kept getting stuck in the ground. Another deer hunter said, you'll be easier if you push it the other way. They began to go the other direction. They said, boy, it is right. He's right. It's much easier. The antlers aren't sticking in the ground. But the other guy said, yeah, but we're getting farther and farther from our truck. And that's what happens with sin. You may think it's easier this way. It doesn't seem to be sticking in the, it's just easier. But you're getting farther away from God. Don't let it happen. Kill it, and be done with it once and for all. Take the heads off. If you have any giants in your life, anything that's keeping you down, driving you crazy, sucking the life out of you, defying God's will in your life, find a way to say, I will not do this anymore. And just say, the battle is the Lord's. I'm not going to take it anymore. Kneel down, get your stones. And when God tells you to throw it, aim it and kill the giant. And trust God to kill that giant at exactly the place that giant needs to be killed. And it'll be gone from your life. Finally, when you look at this in a cosmic sense, that battle between Goliath and David is a microcosm of the final great controversy battles going on between Christ and Satan. Christ had to come down out of heaven, man on man against Satan there in the desert. And then finally, just before at Calvary, every demon in the universe was there to fight the battle. Every demon was there throughout Christ's life to get him to sin one time. Christ goes 33 years and never is defeated one single time. And finally, he's in the grave. Satan thought that he had him there. But every demon in the universe was there to keep Christ in the grave. There was the Roman guard, there was a stone. And yet on Sunday morning, God calls Christ out, rolls the stone away. The Roman guard is gone. And Christ comes out and he says, don't be afraid anymore. I was dead, but now I'm alive. And now I have the keys to death and hell. And we're told, the Desire of Ages, that Satan knew at that moment that he had lost the battle. He was going to be destroyed someday. Not yet, but he will be. We've already heard the news. The battle is over. Colossians 2:15, Christ has triumphed over all the powers in the world. Ephesians 6, we wrestle not against principalities, against flesh and blood, against principalities and powers. But we believe the accuser of the brethren has already been cast down, Revelation 12. Christ has won the victory. It may look as if we still have the sword and spears and javelin all around, and there's still Goliaths in our world. But because Christ has already won the victory at the cross and the resurrection, we all win. When Goliath was going to win, all of them would win. But when David won the battle, all of the Israelites ran out there and won the battle, went home to their wives that night and said, what a great battle we have won. God wins the battle. We all get the victory. Sometimes I've been at a Dodger game, Los Angeles, and you're watching the Dodgers lose. When all of a sudden the whole crowd begins to cheer. What happened? They were listening to the Lakers play in the playoffs, and the Lakers had won. They were listening to another game. We may be living in our world, and it seems like we're losing. But you and I, by faith, are imagining another world where God has already won. You and I have already won. Don't be afraid. And someday we're going to win the final battle.